On August 18, 2022, I boarded a plane in Phoenix, Arizona, to fly to Newark, New Jersey, and then on to Johannesburg in South Africa for a safari. We would be visiting South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, and Cape Town over 3 weeks' time. It was at the Joburg Hotel we met Abi Nyoni from Overseas Adventure Travels, an enthusiastic and knowledgeable guide who ushered us onto a van which took us to our first camp in the Wang National Park in his country, Zimbabwe. This park is almost 1,000 square miles. This is what we stayed in, as in all the camps. Well, I'll never say no to glamping. After a brief orientation, we knew how to secure our valuables and how to stay safe. We were not to go out of our tents after staff members dropped us off there at night, since the natural inhabitants of this park would be tromping through. All the camps were in game refuges where animals were protected, at least as long as they stayed in the refuge. Each camp hosted us for 3 nights, meals and laundry included, and then we would leave in jeeps to board a van, bus, or plane to go on to the next camp and country. On our first drive, we saw elephants and lions. We could tell they were African elephants because their ears were shaped like Africa. Did you know elephants drink 50 gallons of water a day? You'll notice these seem to be covered with mud. They coat themselves in mud because their skin gets so dry under the African sun it cracks and develops sores to which insects and ticks have easy access. Elephants are very protective of their young. This guy is giving our jeep a thorough looking over before moving on. But we are safe with this one. Here, a mother is trying to teach her baby to drink. He's having a great time. This other baby is trying to follow his mom and is having trouble making it up the hill. We were very lucky on our first day to come upon a pride of lions. This pride had about 20 lions. The head lion will mate with as many lionesses as possible on a regular basis. Fidelity is not an issue between the females. It's all about building up the pride so it will survive. Males protect the pride's territory. Females do the hunting in packs, with the males backing them up for the heavier work. Lionesses have a strong mothering instinct and take care of their own and neglected cubs. 2 lionesses usually give birth near the same time and raise their cubs together. I really looked forward to the high teas we had a couple times a day during the drives. It was time to chat and ask questions and eat homemade cookies and drink coffee or tea. There were sunsets perfect for cocktail hours, too. In 2019, when I booked this trip with Oat, I learned that giraffes were close to becoming endangered. That and a timely invitation from my friend Marcy Quigley to join a group for this ultimate African safari was my trigger for signing up. We did see these beautiful animals, but the Natural Resources Defense Council website indicates they are in serious trouble. They are scientifically endangered, but not legally, due to needed action from various government institutions. The population overall has declined 40% in 30 years. The remaining herds are fragmented and face many threats from habitat loss from conversion of woodland into farms, ranches, and to poaching. A primary contributor to the giraffe's loss of habitat is Africa's charcoal industry, which is booming, with many Africans making their living harvesting trees and burning the wood for this purpose. While this cottage industry is helpful to many low-income workers, it's a problem for giraffes who rely on these trees for sustenance. The tourist industry in Africa is a huge source of income in the form of $168 billion annually, with 24.6 million jobs created in a normal year. So, obviously, if Africa were to lose its tourist industry, which in some places is the first or second largest industry in the country, it would spell economic trouble as it did during COVID from 2020 through 2021. This realization came home to me the evening we were welcomed to a middle-class family's house for dinner during our stay in Victoria Falls. We heard about the tough years endured during COVID, which drastically affected jobs, as it did in America. But in this African country, there weren't government subsidies to assist people in making it through those years. Us American tourists were a sight for sore eyes. This 3-generation household served 10 different dishes and gave us a fond farewell when the evening was over. Keeping this in mind, a part of the tourism is often based on safaris where people can view the wild animals. Some tourism companies, including OAT, are investing in the community, work with governments and communities to set aside land for wildlife corridors, large areas of land that wildlife can use to travel between parks and countries. Corridors give creatures like the roan antelope the ability to roam freely and safely as they move in search of water, travel to calving grounds, expand gene diversity, and look for food. It also works with the countries and communities to alleviate food security problems and increase revenue while reducing wildlife habitat loss. One afternoon, we were taken to an anti-poaching headquarters in Wang National Reserve and met the members of the anti-poaching team. The team's activities were paid for by one of the tour companies since the government cannot fund them. Countries in southern Africa have a shoot-to-kill policy on poachers. As 2022 anti-poaching team efforts in Zimbabwe had killed 24 poachers in the first 8 months of that year, but lost 10 team members in the process. Many of the poachers are ex-military and have guns, and they know how to use them.
Then they decided to employ us as anti-poaching unit, which they were looking forward for us to defeat this kind of poaching, which you see these bunches of wires. They are from the bush. These are what we call wire snares. By now, this kind of poaching is declining.
Nighttime was a time to enjoy good food and relax. Travelers in the group got along very well and were a lot of fun. Abi said, talk about American politics was not allowed, and that's probably why we got along so well. Not to mention, it was just a really nice group of people. One afternoon, we had a basket-making class. Cindy and Marlene had a go at the weaving with some success. saying in the end, it must take a great deal of patience to make just one basket. Most people, when traveling to Africa, want to see the Big Five, which are lions, leopards, rhinos, elephants, and Cape buffalo. The term, coined in the late 1800s during Africa's colonial period, refers to what trophy hunters considered the most challenging and dangerous animals to hunt on foot. The critically endangered black rhino, found mainly in eastern and southern Africa, used to be in the hundreds of thousands and popular game for trophy hunters. There are now around 5,600 left. In Zambia, there are only 20 left, and they reside in a highly guarded preserve, so it's the one Big Five animal we did not see. The leopard. According to the AWF website, leopards are the largest member of the cat family to climb trees, which they need to do to keep their kill away from other animals and have more time to eat it. There's a good reason for them to do so. Our group of 9 was anxious to see a leopard. In the end, we saw 4 at different locations. The leopard's numbers are in decline. These cats can carry a meal into a tree, climbing up to 50 feet while hoisting an animal that may be larger or heavier than itself. We actually saw a cub in a tree eating game provided by its mother. Cheetahs are found in only 9% of their historic range and are functionally extinct. Surprisingly, they do not do well in wildlife reserves. These areas normally are very dense with other large predators like the lion and leopard. These predators compete with the cheetahs for prey and will even kill cheetahs given the opportunity. Therefore, roughly 90% of cheetahs in Africa live outside of protected lands on private farmlands and thus come into conflict with people. Imagine our excitement when we saw these 2 in the park. Unlike other cats, they can go for weeks without hunting. A day in the life. One day we took a break from game drives and visited the small village of Lukosi near Wang National Park in Zimbabwe. At Lukosi, we were greeted with lots of smiles. This young man who was attending school showed us around the village. We were offered dried mopane worms to eat.
And then once they are dried, they can last a very long time. And then when you are making them, you have to put them in boiling water, depending how you want them.
Residents demonstrated casting bricks to build huts. Women pounded millet for food. Kids played with toys and each other while chickens roamed freely. We were given a tour of the village, vegetable garden, and herd of goats. Sitting together in a hut, we talked about the similarities and differences between our 2 countries.
At what age do males get married?
I would be remiss not to mention the Africans' love of their cattle. Rather than put their money in banks, they invested in cattle. Cattle can be eaten, they multiply, and can be used in the negotiation for a bride. The men provide the dowry here, which is given to the parents of his future wife. Before leaving, we carried in our gift of groceries.
Thank you.
On our way out, we stopped at St. Mary's School and talked with the principal, Mrs. Thakatziel Dude. Several of the school's buildings were built by OAT. I was amazed at how many different types of antelopes we saw on our drives. To me, these were the most beautiful animals I had ever seen. We saw dukers, bush bucks, water bucks, hartebeests, impalas, kudus, pukus, roans, sables, and red lechwis. Our last night in the Baobab camp in Chobe National Park, the staff heard that Judy and Mike Devine were celebrating their 56th anniversary. This inspired a wonderful party, including a beautiful cake and, of course, singing. During our last night in one of the other camps, we went up to the Boma, a place of special ceremonies, for our farewell dinner and party, and were further entertained with more dancing and singing and great food. Our hosts strongly encouraged us to entertain them in return, saying they watched the NBC TV show America's Got Talent and seemed to think all Americans had talent. There were no takers at first, but, not wanting to disappoint, I sang a rendition of the little-known song I'd learned from my uncle called Ragtime Joe, about a cowboy in the Wild West. I got enthusiastic applause. Our final river cruise before leaving the bush was on a very nice boat, and drinks and appetizers were served. When we returned to shore, a beautiful table was set out for us, and we ate well. One of our group, Ed, was having a birthday, and so we sang in his New Year and shared a delicious carrot cake with him before heading out the next morning to Cape Town. We spent our last days before heading into the city at Shakawi Lodge, which was actually a resort. On our way there, we stopped by a group of carvers who did some amazing work with what they call leadwood. We know it as ironwood. Anyone in the States who has seen ironwood carvings can appreciate the detail exhibited in these pieces made from this extremely hard wood. Once in Cape Town, we took a gondola ride to the top of Table Mountain, where we could see all of Cape Town spread out before us. We continued on to the Cape Peninsula itself, along the coast road, and saw the Atlantic Ocean crashing against the tall cliffs. Although the baboons we'd seen before in the bush seemed pretty mellow and family-oriented, we met a baboon guard on this trip and learned the baboons in this area were very aggressive and unintimidated by human owners of houses breaking into homes in a community down the slope from the mountain road. It had been such a problem, it was necessary to hire and train fellows like this baboon guard to use paint guns to drive them away before they reached the houses. The Stellenbosch University garden was beautiful, with a variety of plants and flowers. This garden supports research and training within Stellenbosch University. The research has an increasingly strong conservation focus with work on species on the brink of extinction. One thing we enjoyed was hanging out at the wharf in Cape Town, which was within walking distance of our hotel. I decided to try playing the marimba one day. The band there, which was making beautiful music, humored me when I asked to borrow the mallets. We walked the streets of Cape Town and visited its vibrant street market as well as the Slavery Museum. The pride with which the vendors displayed their wares was evident in their eyes and showed a variety of art forms from painting to weaving and so on. A late afternoon treat was stopping along the False Bay coastline to see the penguins at Boulders Beach. These are warm weather penguins, and as you can see, they enjoy surfing and hanging out together in the warm sand. One of the most memorable field trips was taking a boat to Robben Island in the Western Cape Province, 6 miles north of Cape Town. From the mid-1960s to 1991, Robben Island served as South Africa's maximum security prison. Most inmates, including Nelson Mandela, were black men incarcerated for political offenses. It is now a World Heritage Site. The guide showing us the prison had been an inmate for 7 years himself as a young man. Mandela had been there for 18 years. It was a pretty rough place. In our wandering, we discovered a row of art galleries on this colorful street. I was so impressed with this one artist's work, I asked to interview him and bought some of his prints.
I'm Anthony de Klerk, local artist here in Burkhart, Cape Town. Born and bred in South Africa, and I'm inspired by young people that I meet, people who often overcome difficult odds. So this whole series of portraits here is part of a series called Dreamers and Heroes. Dreamers are all young people, young ambitious people that I've personally met. And the heroes, of course, being Nelson Mandela, Steve Biko, Chris Hani. It's an ongoing series. I keep painting new people as I meet them. And there's new heroes emerging all the time.
No trip to southern Africa would be complete without a visit to Victoria Falls. I paid for a helicopter ride to get those all-important aerial shots. Victoria Falls, called Thundering Smoke by some natives, is a waterfall on the Zambezi River in southern Africa, which provides a habitat for several unique species of plants and animals. It is located on the border between Zambia and Zimbabwe. Victoria Falls is classified as the largest based on its combined width and height, resulting in the world's largest sheet of falling water. The Victoria Falls are roughly twice the height of North America's Niagara Falls and well over twice its width. It was a long-awaited and fascinating trip. We said goodbye to our guide and each other and boarded a plane in Johannesburg to return to the States or go on to the next journey. In retrospect, it made me much more aware of the life on a totally different continent. The cooperative relationship between animals, plants, and their environments was endlessly fascinating and left me wanting to learn more. Many animals roam together in order to augment or compensate for each other's weaknesses in the quest for survival. An animal's way of feeding was often complementary to an ecosystem's need for maintenance and renewal. The need to kill or die was just part of everyday life, with the old and the very young being the most vulnerable, and the limitless ingenuity of people living in poverty who not only make the best of what they have, waste nothing, but do it cheerfully. It was such a contrast to life in America, where the variety and availability of food, clothing, and other possessions, and even education, is taken for granted, and waste is so common. Overall, the conflict between the economic pressures of humans trying to eke out a living for their families and the collision of those efforts on wildlife habitat space and food was clear. The endless demand for the acquisition of sellable goods and trophies from the outside leaves its mark. Many are oblivious or apathetic toward the impact on a planet and its inhabitants quickly meeting an uncertain future. How to reconcile these forces is the true conundrum of the 21st century.